I talked about Skyward Sword in 2 videos before, so instead of making a review for Skyward Sword HD, I wanted to re-edit and re-upload some parts where I talked about why I love the game so much. The first 7 minutes are from my most anticipated games of 2021, where I talked about why I'm excited to replay the game. Enjoy that, and then wait around until the end, where I edited in a part from my top 20 games of the decade video, where I talked about, at the time, a hypothetical remake. And I basically accurately predicted how the button controls are going to work in Skyward Sword HD. Thank you for watching and listening. So then at number 1 is Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD. Skyward Sword is my favorite Zelda game ever, and it gets a lot of hate. A lot of people like to say that the overworld is small and empty, but really they just mean the sky and Skyloft. But that's just the beginning area. Like, it's just like Kokiri Forest basically in Ocarina of Time, and I'm not gonna call that the overworld. That's not the overworld. The world on the ground is the overworld basically, and there's a lot of backtracking, and it's funny that a lot of people use that against it. They say like you have to keep coming back to the same area, which is funny because these areas are pretty big, and like you don't say that about like a Metroid game. Like in Metroid, it's a great thing to have backtracking, and it's just funny. Basically, it's like, I won't spoil exactly how you make progress and stuff, but let's say there's like an area that's cut off with rocks, and then later on in the game you have bombs, so you're like, oh, now I can go back to the first area and go bomb those rocks and go to a whole piece of that area that I've never been to, and then you can make progress again that way. And that's really fun about backtracking, in my opinion. And I guess I can see that that's overwhelming because there's also dungeons, that also focus on that. But I thought that was great, to be honest. And something I really liked was that the main area, Skyloft, was also the beginning area. So it's like Kokiri Forest from Ocarina of Time and Kakariko Village combined. Like you meet people from the beginning and you still get to see them. And that's basically like how it was in Clocktown in Majora's Mask. Speaking of Majora's Mask, I didn't enjoy Majora's Mask as much. It was very overwhelming and intimidating to me, but I ended up still playing it and loving it. But at times I didn't like it, and I see a lot of people, they like to write off Skyward Sword, like, oh, I don't like motion controls, I don't like the whole setting and stuff. But I mean, if I can like Majora's Mask, even though I was intimidated by it, then so can everybody with Skyward Sword. And it's funny that a lot of people there are so against motion controls. I personally loved it. I played a lot of games before, but it wasn't until the Zelda games that I started to play more kinds of games. And I was only 14 years old when Ocarina of Time 3D and Skyward Sword came out. So the motion controls were very welcomed for me because it was an easy way to learn to play 3D games. And I'm just surprised that so many people complain about it, because really, isn't button control something you had to learn once? Isn't that something that's kind of difficult in a way? Why are motion controls so terrible to people? In my opinion, it made Skyward Sword great. And now there's an option for buttons, so people, if they want that, there is that. Which is funny to me because, in my opinion, Skyward Sword should have been a launch game on the Wii U. They should have held out a year, because like it was 2011. HD was, the Xbox 360 and PS3 were already out, so HD consoles were already a thing. And the Wii U came out a year later. I don't understand. It's the dumbest decision ever to me that they didn't wait until the Wii U came out, because then it would have been in HD already. It wouldn't need the Switch version that we get now. And they could have done button controls or maybe touchscreen controls on the gamepad. But I like the game fine. It's funny, I played it, I think, like 6 times from the beginning to end. And I think I played it a couple of years ago, recently even. And I saw the trailer, and honestly, I thought, what's the difference? Like, it looks the same. But then I looked back, like I saw a comparison video of the original and the HD version. And yeah, it looked pretty terrible. The original version is very blurry, very rigid, very like blocky compared to the new version, and there was less color. So yeah, the HD version looks pretty good. It could have looked better, but it looks good. But yeah, like I said, the Wii U version, if that existed, it would have sold a lot. I think if it was a launch game on the Wii U, I think like 10 million people would have bought it, because like it wasn't a success on the Wii, because nobody cared about the Wii at that point anymore. And a lot of people, like pretty early on in the Wii U life cycle, they announced the new Zelda game, which turned out to be Breath of the Wild. And yeah, a lot of people were waiting for that game. They wanted to buy a Wii U for it. So honestly, I think they would have done the same for Skyward Sword. So I just think it's a ridiculous idea that they decided to put it out on Wii and not just wait a year more for the Wii U version. And of course, they learned their lesson with it with Breath of the Wild. Something I'm worried about is the motion controls on the Switch are a lot worse. Like there's a lot of drift in the Joy-Con, and it's funny that a lot of people like to claim that the Joy-Con have better technology, but that's really just because they're thinking with logic. They're just thinking, oh, it's newer, so it's probably better, but it's really not. There's a lot of drift in the Joy-Con. The Joy-Con just don't work great half the time. The Wii motion controls, they worked way better. So I'm worried about that a bit. But I mean, I guess I could try the button controls if it doesn't work out. But yeah, Skyward Sword has a great story, great music, great atmosphere, great art style, great side quests, a lot of backtracking that I love, character development, emotional stuff, funny stuff. Honestly, it has everything that I want in a Zelda game. And it might be my favorite game ever, but it's probably F-Zero GX. And Super Mario Sunshine is probably second, and then third, I guess, Skyward Sword HD. But they're all very close, all very close. Right below is probably the Smash Brothers games and the Metroid games or whatever. But yeah, Skyward Sword pretty high up in my favorite games ever. Yeah, it's just kind of weird to me how a lot of people don't give it a chance when really they're claiming to be big Zelda fans, and they say things like the opening was boring or too long, and really that's the same thing with pretty much every Zelda game. Like Skyward Sword is not different from that, and they're saying things like the motion controls suck and stuff, but really, I guess I can't say objectively, but like really they work really well. If you have your sensor bar and if you just calibrate your controller a lot, then it should be good. And you shouldn't, that's the thing, a lot of people, they probably like waggled, like they think like you could just waggle, but really because of Motion Plus, you have to be really accurate. Like you have to really do a side slash whatever if you really want to do that. You have to really do that. And it doesn't mean you have to stand or whatever. You can just do that sitting down. But I think a lot of people, they don't realize that the motion controls are more accurate than they think. I think that's the problem a bit. But yeah, there's button controls, so even those people can enjoy it. And yeah, like I said before, I was pretty intimidated by Majora's Mask, and I ended up playing it and really loving it too. So, because really all Zelda games are so similar, you know, they all share things that we love. So if I can enjoy Majora's Mask that way, then so can people like Skyward Sword. Okay, and then here's the clip from my top 20 games of the decade video where I talked about, at the time, a hypothetical remake, and I basically accurately predicted how the button controls are going to work in Skyward Sword HD. Thank you again for watching and listening. I love the motion controls. I think it's, I mean, I get it. I mean, if you don't like motion controls, that's fine. But it's just, it worked for me, and I had so much fun puzzling with that, and the combat was so much fun with that. And honestly, when they announced that there was a Zelda for Wii U, which turned out to be Breath of the Wild, of course, I was really like, how are they going to implement motion controls? I was like, okay, well, I guess they could use the Wii remote, but you know, they have that gamepad, so I think motion controls are done with. And then they confirmed later that, yeah, motion controls are not coming to the Zelda for Wii U game. And I was so disappointed by it. And now with Breath of the Wild, it feels normal again to not have motion controls. But there was a time when I didn't know how a Zelda game could exist without it, you know. It felt like so much part of how Zelda games were going to be. If you're someone who just doesn't want to play the game purely because it has motion controls, like, why? How is that an argument? What, like, that just sounds so stupid. Come on, man. Like, really? Like, did you miss out on like the entire Wii generation then? Did you miss out on Mario Galaxy? How could you miss out on Mario Galaxy? That because it has motion controls? Stop. Come on. Just stop. I think, honestly, because people are like that, I hope they remake the game for the Switch and maybe implement some like button controls. regular button controls are not possible with Skyward Sword because you have like a diagonal movement with your sword and stuff. But something I've been thinking about is how it doesn't really have a 3D camera movement because the Wii doesn't have a right stick. And I think a good replacement for motion controls could be that you just move your sword by using the right control stick, and like how you flick it like horizontally and sideways, and uh I think that's a pretty good replacement. I think if they got that to work, that would be amazing. I would play it like that. I wouldn't mind.